Okay, ready when you are.
Cool. Kelsea, thank you so much for coming onto my podcast, The Art of Transformation. I did see you through the Menace Network, so I'm very interested in what you've got going on. Reason why I got you on here. Let me introduce you real quick because I was checking out some of your information. I saw that you have this book. Let me see that, Expensive Skin. Yeah, let me see that. Very nice, very nice. And let me go over this information real quick. Description of the book says, Expensive Skin is a collage of my experiences as I navigate sobriety and mental health as a woman, a daughter, a sister, a partner, an engineer, and an officer in the Army. Wow. Everyone has hardships in life. This book reveals how I have moved through those darkest moments. It wasn't graceful, pretty, or perfect, but I grew a lot, and I share these lessons inside each chapter as it meaningfully relates to my tattoos. And that's exactly where I was right before you came on. I was reading your book. And so, yeah, I picked it up on Amazon. Everyone that's interested, this is Expensive Skin by Kelsea Peterson here. And tell us a little bit more, Kelsea. I thank you for coming on here again.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat. It sounds like we have a lot of the same common interests, so
yes.
It should be a good conversation. So yeah, I wrote this book initially just to process what I went through. Basically, over the last year or so, I went through a really dark time. It was pretty recent. Yes. My fiance left me, and I relapsed. Then he left me, and then that's really when I got suicidal. I managed to get sober again and stay sober. Yes. Until I went to Africa with the Army, and being in that austere environment and not being very stable. Even though I was staying sober, I got suicidal again, like, yeah, very serious. Tried to kill myself, and instead I didn't. Thankfully, still here today. And I went to a treatment center for 5 weeks. That was a huge phase of transformation for me. I was really struggling after my relapse to get any traction, to move on from my fiance leaving me and everything, and this life that I had imagined and sure, getting ripped away. So so that's sort of where I was when I wrote the book. I had gotten back in treatment, and I kind of need to process all of this. What about me and how I've handled emotions my whole life led me to this point, and what are the lessons I've learned on how I got out of it. And so I try to be really detailed in what my thought processes were in those deep dark moments, and then and the tools, the mindset, everything that I did to get out of it. And the goal is to help others know that there are solutions. That I think it's so scary being suicidal and thinking that you're alone because no one understands the pain that you're in, and so it's inherently a very lonely experience. Right. I knew people loved me. But I also knew they didn't feel my pain. Yeah. But what helps, I think, is actually knowing, yeah, there are people out there that know your pain, that have been right where you've been, and we can talk about it. And so that's why I wrote the book and published it. I wrote initially to process it, and then I published it because I just thought that it was going to be helpful to others. Yeah. And so that's what my goal is. Yeah. And I have a lot of gratitude for that too. And it's like I look up at people like you that have the bravery to do the things that you're doing, to be so vulnerable in front of so many people. So thank you for what you're doing. Sometimes I don't think people realize
like how much of an impact they have with other people when they do these things. They like it might seem small and insignificant, but it actually means a lot to a lot of people, especially someone that's contemplating those things. And I do have some experience with that myself, right? My dad the other day, he's got dementia, so he has a hard time processing a lot of the information and feelings that are happening to him right now. And he, you know, it's like that sense of purpose, that sense of responsibility and dignity. It's difficult. And you know, it's like we do get into these things. Personally, for me, like I broke my leg when I was 17. I was on bed rest for 2 years, so like I was distanced from everybody else. This happened like in high school, so like it was a lot of turmoil, you know, for me. Like it was just like at a point in time when I thought I was supposed to be getting getting closer to my goals of like getting into college and doing all this stuff, and it didn't happen. So that loneliness, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it was definitely a tough situation for me. But you have experience in the forces. You also you work as a contractor, as an engineer for a contractor here in Phoenix as well. So you have tons of real life experience, and we leverage off that stuff too. You know, it's like when you kind of share and relate like your position, you know, it's like you're talking to a group of people that have that are going through something like that. And I love how you phrase this stuff too. Like you're talking about your mom, your home, and you know, it's like your childhood struggles. You mentioned that, like the trampoline incident, right, where you you run away from the house, and then like right around the block you realize that that's probably not going to work, and you come back home, right? I had a very similar experience. I made some sandwiches when someone, like I think I was like 7 or 8. Someone yelled at me. I made some sandwiches, put it in like a bag, and then I walked around the corner, and I realized, I was like, shoot, this isn't gonna work. I have to go back.
I know we've all done that.
Yeah, we've all done that.
I am so sorry to disrupt the conversation. My dog is
no, go ahead.
Right now. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was really distracting.
No, dogs are awesome. I love them.
He was just chilling, and so I thought he'd be fine, but he's not. That's Milo, who I write about in the book later on when you get there. When you get to that point, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's him.
That's so cool.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of parts in the book that are relatable. Maybe not to the extremes that I feel. I mean, I'm sure they're relatable to some people, but I think more generally, the underlying emotions that I've experienced are just normal emotions that all humans confront at some point in their life. Anxiety, depression, experiencing pain, uncertainty, and worry. Like those are just normal things that all of us experience at different degrees throughout our life. And so I'm just really trying to normalize that and normalize those conversations, because feeling like nobody understands your pain when you get to a crisis moment is what's causing so many teens and people to kill themselves every year, and just increasing in number. And so I just think if we destigmatize as a society those conversations, then we're less likely to see those numbers continue to rise. So that's
exactly what we're trying to do on this podcast as well. I do talk with someone that is involved with neurodiverse relationships, people that are on the autism scale, and that are in neurodiverse, like that don't necessarily know that they're in neurodiverse relationships, you know, and that's difficult for people, because on the outside it looks very different from what's happening on the inside of that relationship. You know, it's like they project an image of success and happiness and all this other stuff, and they're always smiling, but on the inside something else is going on, right? So normalizing this type of conversation with other people, you know, it's like on a relatable scale, you know, it's like we're This is a normal conversation that I have with most people. Like, this is something that I like to talk to other people about. And some people, I feel, get drained by the conversation because they can't look at themselves in that way, and that's a really hard thing to do. But
Yeah.
you're right. I think everyone does go through something like this, and in a way, you know, it's like maybe not to those extremes. I know I was very imaginative in my own personal experience, and I exacerbated and exaggerated a lot of this stuff for like a sense of attention, right? But it's not always like that. It's very different for every person, and you know, it's like listening becomes a skill. That's
Yeah.
that's where I've gotten to.
Yeah, I think when you say like exasperated it with attention, it sounds similar to like how I behaved when I didn't understand my emotions. I think it's just like you don't understand it, so you push it off into the rest of the world. I say in my book, like I spit out salt, or I would drink in salt. I use the salt and sugar metaphor, and salt being the hard realities of life, and sugar being the kind of imagination, what we want. The feel good stuff, and I drink in I drink in salt thinking it's sugar, and then I spit it out all over everyone close to me that loves me.
Yeah.
And so just when you said I think I was being dramatic about it or whatever, it's like I also think, again, like just having a more common dialogue about it would help people understand their emotions, and then it wouldn't have this stigma of like, oh, this person's just being dramatic or doesn't, you know, is out crying for help. I don't know exactly what your behavior was, but
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You know, it's like I do feel a lot of people do bottle this stuff up because they think they can't talk about it, or they think that they're a drain or a burden, or that they you know, it's like it's only happening to them, and it's not. You know, it's like there's other people that are struggling, you know, that are going through this stuff, and you know, but really understanding yourself, though, you know, it's like really coming back to like full circle onto like really understanding what those emotions are saying, or being able to listen to your inner child. You know, it's like I do talk to people about like healing that inner child narrative, and recognizing, you know, like shifting that lens of I don't know, personally for me, it was just like a sense of self-pity, and thinking that my pain was worse than everybody else's, when there were plenty of examples in life that showed me otherwise, right? And I couldn't see that. Like I couldn't see the other people, so I felt alone.
Yeah, and we're addicted to that pity party too. I mean, I just had one over the weekend, and I have a sponsor. She's amazing. I'm in the AA program, and I had to call her because something had happened, and instead of turning to my God, my understanding of God, and giving up control over the situation, and just kind of like, you know, this is part of the process. I can only do the next right thing. Instead of going to that mentality, I call her and went straight into the pity party mode. And it feels good to have a pity party. It honestly does. It sucks, but it feels good in a way.
Yeah,
like,
it's true.
And she just tells me point blank, like, you know, it's really normal to have a pity party and want to, because it feels good.
Yeah.
But remember that you have God, and that you don't have to be in control of this situation. And I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. You called me out, and so we still. I mean, I'm a work in progress, but I think it's totally normal. I like that it happens less frequently now. It doesn't happen over, you know, me spilling coffee anymore.
Yeah,
stuff like that. But
yeah.
it comes up when things are meaningful. I also think like what you were saying about people struggling, or maybe not even being able to look into themselves.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge. I don't think my book is going to reach everybody, because some people just don't want to think about that stuff, and understandably it's hard stuff to think about, and some people will go their whole lives happily not having to do that hard work.
Sure.
I think it gave me a more authentic, real, peaceful life to do all this work, all the introspective work. But some people manage to just get by, and I'm not judging that at all. Like, part of me is probably a little envious,
Sure.
but I think just the diet, more people than not do need to learn some things in adulthood, how to process things, because as children, how we process things, we carry those same fears that we had as kids in us, and those aren't rational, but we don't know that, like, until we do that inner child work that you were talking about, or really go deep into our fears and what are our fears. And so I learned, like, for me what that looked like, my fear work was doing my resentments inventory for my 12 steps. It's a big part of the 12-step program. And I just learned so much about myself when I did that, because with each resentment, the big important part for me was the fears column. So, like, you write out who you're resentful of, what they did to you, what your part in it was, and then your fear. And all my fears were the exact same. It was that I was unlovable and I wasn't enough. And so once I realized that, now throughout my whole day, when something causes, I use anxiety now as as a helpful tool for me. Like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. What am I feeling anxious about? What narrative am I telling myself? Usually it leads back to that fear of I'm not lovable or I'm not enough. And then my rationality can come into play and help me move through that. And so my mind and my heart are much more aligned just by having that work done. And so, yeah, I think it's been life-changing for me.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And I think what you're tapping on right now is like the idea of emotional intelligence, right? Like being able to slow yourself down from and separate something between like emotion and logic. And it's like when you're looking at those fears, when you're actually doing the work, right? And I think that's that's really brave of you to be able to do. That's not everyone's going to be able to do that. And I feel that even if you were just to touch one person with your book, that's a huge gift. It's like that's a big deal. So yeah, I love your book. And more people will have to get that too. I was talking about like depression too. Like I was depressed for many years. After I broke my leg, I didn't know what to do with myself. And it's like those things, they stack up too. It's like relationships, the importance of relationships, and how we, it's like how we view our relationships and the lenses that we're using in relationships. Those are really important components that I communicate with my allies, because those relationships help you see things that we can't necessarily see by ourselves, like you were saying, right? Like the whole pitying ourselves and then leaving things to God kind of thing too. It's like we sometimes we put on so much burden on ourselves and so much responsibility that's fake, that's not even real. And it's like how do we go about finally just kind of like shrugging some of this stuff off and being able to move forward, like you were saying. So
I think we're really hard on ourselves. There's like two things that I have a question for you about. But yeah, we're so hard on ourselves. I guess I'm wondering if that was something you struggled with in your depression, was like negative self-talk, because that was something that I had to do in order to get acceptance for how things were. Is I had to do a lot of work with what stories I was telling myself that weren't reality.
Sure.
I am smart. I am enough. I am lovable. I had to do these affirmations like every day, 5 times twice a day. Like it was a lot. And then I started believing it. Yeah. But I asked my sister this in my book club. I've been doing a book club for Expensive Skin. On Thursdays. And
where's that at? Where do you guys hold it?
It's just virtual.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a virtual book club. Just we're reading through 2 chapters a week and then talking about.
Cool. You gotta send me that information so that we
I
can.
will. I would love if you were there. I think you would really enjoy it.
Cool.
Yeah. But I asked my sister, because my sister called on to it, and I was like, you've always been much more level-headed than me, and like just kind of emotionally intelligent, like she just stable, emotionally intelligent. She just kind of had a different level than me our whole lives. And I was like, what did you have negative self-talk? Like, how much of that was a factor, do you think, in how we processed the world?
Yeah.
And she's like, not really. Like, she doesn't really have negative self-talk at all, and she knows how I have negative self-talk. And so it was just interesting, like the difference and how important it is to actually being able to accept your emotions. Like, you have to accept yourself. And so that's where like rationality and our emotions kind of have to start working together. And then the other thing that you had mentioned, was connection. I talk about that. I love this. Like, all these things are so important to my growth. So, but have you read Johann Hari's book called Lost Connections?
I haven't read that.
Oh my gosh, I think you'd like it, because when you first talked about the 2 years of like having to be bed rest, my first thought was, oh my gosh, he had to be so depressed because he had no friends. Like,
I didn't have any friends. Like I
yeah, how could you? You couldn't do anything for 2 years. Oh my gosh,
I played a lot of video games. That's what I did. I got really good at video games.
Yeah, I bet.
So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and because that book proves that anxiety and depression can be eliminated or greatly reduced through a bunch of different scientific studies that he discusses throughout the whole book.
Yeah.
By connection, by just connecting with people.
Yeah.
And so just doing the opposite action, like when you feel depressed and you don't want to, you want to hide yourself away from the world. That's how I get. I just opposite action. Okay, I have to get my ass out to go see some people, some friends, some like good connection, not like toxic. I used to do that too. I wouldn't go see the friends that love me. I'd go see like a toxic ex-boyfriend or something too. Yeah. So it's like I have to remember that. Like, oh yeah, positive, healthy connection is what helps your anxiety and depression.
It's strange though, like the way that we choose our friends and the way that we choose our time too. It's like sometimes like we're like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. It's like, this sounds like a fun idea, right? But then we go do it and we're like, this was a bad idea. And so I've been in those situations too, and it took me a while to stop drinking. I drank pretty heavy for like through my 20s and into my 30s, and then finally I was just like realizing I'm spending most of my paycheck fucking.
It's expensive. I don't know how to afford it.
So like that part of it was coming to acceptance. It's like accepting any difficulty is going to be really challenging. Accepting another person for just who they are and not necessarily wanting them to change, right? But looking at it from your own perspective. This is the yogic idea, like the yogic philosophy, right? That it's like, you're not going to change the world. You gotta work on yourself first before you start changing the world. If that's the case, right? You want to change the world, work on yourself, right?
Yeah. And
that's that part of it. It's like you were asking the depression part of it. It's like I didn't have negative self-talk when I broke my leg. Nor even after, really, like shortly after, like when all this stuff really started happening. I was really timid. I was shy, and I didn't create those connections. I stuck with those toxic relationships, and I try to see them through, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can change these people. Like, I can make a better world by working with these people. But that wasn't the case. I had to just finally come to the acceptance that, man, I just have to focus on me for now.
Yeah. I found out that I was a huge control freak when I got sober. Like,
really?
Oh, yeah, with mainly myself, actually. Like, I have a really easy time giving everyone else the benefit of the doubt and just being like, oh, well, life's hard. Like they're doing their best today, you know, like, oh, they didn't put the shopping cart back in the stall. Like everyone does things their own way, you know. Oh, the toilet paper, they flip it this way instead of this way. This way, like, oh, everyone does their own thing. Like we all grew up from different experiences. I'm really, that's never been my problem, controlling other people. Really, it's like it's myself.
Yeah.
And how I'm interacting with the world, I've always been so critical of, and so yeah, having God and just being like, you know, I'm where I'm at. I try and do the next right thing. That's all I can do, and that's enough for my God. And just having that belief has helped me a lot in the acceptance part that you were talking about. I think there was something else that you said that I was totally excited about, and now I lost it. But
it's okay. It's okay. It is absolutely okay. Yeah, my personal background too is like with energy healers. My mom's an energy healer and my aunt's an energy healer. So I do come from that side of it. You know, it's like science has always been like a huge spectacle for me. Like I've been the skeptic in that conversation always. Even like veering into like politics and stuff like that, I always like to give the opposite. You know, it's like, so
yeah, devil advocate.
Yeah, I do like to challenge people. I like to challenge individuals with the way that they think, with the way that they act, the way that, you know, it's like being better, because I feel that I do that with myself to a certain extent. But I'm naturally an overthinker, and that's gotten me into a lot of trouble. On the inside part of it, you know, it's like you're talking about like just start movement, you know, it's like when you get depressed or something like that, and I lead people through like small actionable steps when it comes down to it. You know, it's like getting just the small momentum, just slowly rolling, slowly, like a little tortilla or something like that, and then getting shot off later, like after we've figured out what discipline is. You know, it's like after figuring out like what our personal acceptance level is. You know, it's like, and so many of these things that it's a complex little machine.
Yeah, no, I love that you touched on discipline, because like I'm starting a coaching program too, and one of the first things I'm gonna go over and try and implement is a discipline program. Like, because when you're depressed, you don't have motivation. Been there, like it's just not there. So what you have to fall back on is discipline. And I was really lucky in that I was in the Army, and just you had to be disciplined. Like you had to show up for PT at 6 a.m. You had to be at formation, you know, at 8 or whatever. Like you couldn't miss these times. You couldn't not do something. So I was always having to meet a certain standard. And so and same with when I was in school for engineering, like very difficult school, but I had to meet the standard for this program. So I had the discipline enough to do that. Whereas now in life, I think that was part of why, because I've struggled my whole life, but why I broke, I think, was because I didn't have as much structure in my life. I was still in the Army, but I'm in the Guard, and I was on active duty at the time.
Right.
And I you know, obviously have a job, but I was away from it for I was away with my fiance's father's services for his funeral. But just like discipline can help you move through things with so much more ease.
Yes.
And you don't have to have a lot of motivation to do it.
Right.
So it works really well to get you to move through a depression. It doesn't pull you out of it, but it's like a ladder. And I talk about this also in my book, but like it's like a ladder, and feeling content is at ground level. If you're depressed, you're below ground level. If you're manic or whatever, you there's a ladder up above. But for most people, I think like we go below the surface, and it's a ladder of 10 rungs. If you're feeling like you're on 7, there are things like coping skills and stuff that you're talking about to move you like one step up the ladder, one step up the ladder.
Yeah.
I do talk in my book a lot about medication too, being like, it's not the cure all. Like, I don't think you can just go on medication and call it good. Like, you're always, and Lost Connections by Johann Hari talks about this too, is that you're always gonna have to up your dose. You're always gonna have to up your dose and go on a stronger medication, and you're on benzos and like, and it's not gonna be your cure for depression. But it does help. Some medication does help you, just give you like 3 boosts up the ladder,
Yes.
you know, and then you got enough traction to do your coping skills.
Absolutely.
So I like thinking about it that way when I'm describing it to people, because a lot of people are scared for medication, or they have these judgments about it, that they're crazy pills or something. And it's like, no, it's like, life is hard. You get a free boost up the ladder. You know, you have to keep doing the work. It's not like it's you get to take your happy pill and be done with it.
Yeah.
But it really, really helps. And so I'm a huge advocate and talk about my medication all the time.
Yeah, it's that's I was I'm, how would you say, allergic to certain medications. So, you know, it's like as far as like the pain pills and stuff like that, I was reluctant also to take that. And yes, so yeah. So I never got into that, but I got pretty close to some pretty some bad drugs. You know, it's like some people that were around the wrong circles and stuff like that, and that scared me enough to veer me away from drugs. But when you're in a position where you're depressed and something else is going on, right? We don't take these things into account. You know, it's like the things that could help us. And I don't know enough about the topic to really like speak on it correctly, I think. But the things that I do know, the things that I did take on were things like physiology. You know, it's like having a healthy body that correlated with a healthy mind. You know, it's like bumping up the exercise so that you have more dopamine throughout the day, kind of thing. Waking up at certain hours and getting light into your eyes so that programming of your circadian rhythm functions correctly. Like those are the things that I finally got into. You know, it's like I listened to a lot of Dr. Huberman from Stanford, and he's a neuroscientist and professor over there. And he brings these topics up which are absolutely fascinating to me, especially like on this level, on an empathy level, and bringing it towards the forefront of the mindset community, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking to do too. I love your work, Kelsea. Thank you so
yeah, I really like what you're doing too. That it's really great, and we need more of it in the world. Just mindful living, really. And it sounds like you're helping people with that, and that's amazing. That's so cool.
Do you think there's say, for example, there's room in this type of conversation for something like, say, for example, supernatural?
Yeah, I think so. I think I kind of like how you're like, I haven't been on medication myself, so I can't talk about it. I'm like, I've never had an experience, so I can't talk on it too much.
Sure.
But other than my experience when I really felt God for the first time in my life, like if that counts as supernatural.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Then yeah, I love that. Yeah, when I first felt God, I was going through a hard time at rehab. Basically, my parents weren't incredibly like supportive of the idea of me going to treatment. I just don't think they understand where I was at exactly. When I was like, no, I'm gonna die if I don't go. Like they were concerned about the world. Like, what's your job gonna think? What's all these people in the military gonna think? Like worried about that kind of stuff. Understandable. Like they want to protect their daughter, but I didn't care about that stuff at this point. It was this or dying. So, but I was having a really hard time in treatment in the first like 2 weeks with that. So I mean I was still suicidal, and I was trying to think of ways I could take myself out in treatment. And I just went out. We were doing a lot of yoga in rehab every day. We had a yoga session, and I just learned a new pose, and I was like, I'm just gonna go out and do that. And so I was doing that, and I got present enough. Like I wasn't feeling all the anxiety, and I was saying my purpose statement to myself that I learned, which was to be a better me in this moment. And I was just like, well, taking myself out isn't going to be a better me in this moment. I can just lay here and do yoga and breathe and know that I have a purpose. I have a purpose to trust God. And then I felt God, like I got goosebumps, and it was just undoubtedly an experience with God. Like he was there with me, and I can't. I have other examples like too where I know God intervened, but that was just like when I first felt it, and then it never went away since. So every time I pray now, I still get goosebumps every time I pray. Like it's so weird, but I think I struggled to find God for so long. Basically, from my relapse to when I was in treatment, it was about 4 or 5 months, and I struggled to find God that whole time. And then I finally did, and it hit so deep, and it never left. So my life changed from that moment on, really, because then I was able to give up control so much easier and just do the next right thing, and that's all I can do. God's happy with that. And I swear life just got easier. Like it was weird.
That is fascinating. That is so good. And yeah, the presence of God is something, it's something strange, because I've got friends that believe in God and friends that don't, and it's like friends that are Buddhist and friends that are Gnostic and friends that I like to talk to everybody about this stuff.
Yeah.
My personal experience with that is that I feel that I saw God, and not because of the accident. It happened actually much later when I was working at a pizza place. So it was the strangest thing. It was absolutely the weirdest thing. It was vexing is the word I would use, I think.
Okay.
Because it felt like I knew everybody that was walking in through the door, and I knew the sequence of the individuals that were walking in through the door, and everyone had this weird little shine in their eye.
Wow.
And so like that experience, you know, it's like the first thing I remember is like hearing the swish of the sodas and stuff like that. And you got disrupted.
Okay.
You got interrupted.
Okay, but basically you were seeing God and everybody coming into the pizza shop.
It was the coolest thing. It was the coolest thing. And I just like, I had this interaction with my pizza boss, and he like snaps his fingers, and I swear to you, I saw an equidistant cross in my sight. I closed my eyes, and I hear like his snapping fingers, and like I hear this, I see this like equidistant cross that feels like a sphere because it's consistently moving.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like for me, that coming up being influenced so highly by esotericism and by energy healers and like by this mysterious initiation, right? Like really, it did something to me, and that's when I had a mental breakdown at some point. You know, it's like, yeah, no, it was a lot. It was a lot, because I never had the courage to explain to someone else what I saw, right? Like, this is personal. I want to keep it to myself, but you know, it's like I can't deny that experience.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a really powerful moment. How did you process it eventually?
At first, I couldn't sleep. So I didn't sleep for about 8 days.
Wow.
Yeah, and I simply kept having vision after vision after vision, and like trying to interpret and getting down to like to understanding it, right? Understanding something that was not understandable, something that was omnipresent and omniscient, right? That was just massive, way bigger than myself. what I
Yeah.
realized was that I was looking at my own personal archetype, that I was looking at my own personal call to action that I was giving myself, right? And realizing like where I was in the whole process of self-observation, which was supposed to be my very first step in this in acceptance and growth and personal development and work. So it seemed so weird that this gift was like given to me, but with no instructive, right? Like no instructions at all. There was just like, here you know, it's like, have fun. Like,
Exactly.
like, what does this mean?
Yeah. I think it would have been more weird if you got instructions.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like God wants us to follow our hearts and listen to our hearts. And when we start not doing that, and hearts being emotions too, but when we start not listening, then it just causes this blockage between us and God. And then we have to clear that out to get back. But yeah, I think that's so cool that that's what inspired your work now.
It is. It is. Thank you. Have you ever heard of an aura? Like someone's.
Yeah.
Like, so some people say that they can see auras, right?
Yeah.
And I've talked to individuals that claim that they still have that gift, right? That particular day when I had that vision, I swore that I did see something very similar to what people describe as an aura, right? Wow. So it was the strangest thing because it was just like this infinite spiral of like luminosity and different colors in a person. And then like from beginning to end, it was just like a snap. It was just like, it was a fleeting moment, but so consistent. You know, it's like, it was so there. Like I couldn't.
Yeah. Well, you come from a line of healers and energy readers. Like it would make sense that you'd have that ability. It sounds like it sounds like something you could tap into again. You know, we can learn. People I've heard can learn to tap into being able to see the future if they're given that gift, and can learn how to tap into it. And it's just like a learning how to do that. That sounds so fascinating and cool. Oh my gosh.
So
I don't think I have such a gift. So I don't know, but
you might have it.
That would be really neat if you dove more into that. Yeah, because there's no instruction manual.
I know. Like how where do you go from there, right? So yeah, I mainly just went with my gut, and I started doing things the way that I felt was right, you know. So I just started like banging away at that path. You know, it's like really just delving into like all my deep-rooted ideas and feelings and stuff like that. And I started seeing some really weird things. But after 8 days of being awake, I feel like I also started to hallucinate a little bit.
Yeah.
So like those hallucinations were really weird. You know, it's like I look at the wall and there was like a shadow of a bird, and there was no birds in the room, you know, but there was birds on the wall. So that kind of experience just like really it laid the foundation for what I'm doing now. I feel that I want to help other individuals explain and understand what might be happening with them, and that their purpose is absolutely bigger than what they have just for themselves, right? That we can tap into these higher sources too. My mom believes them to be like angelic sources. Kelsea, are you there?